So, in order to mix things up a little bit, I decided that while I'm working on certain film reviews for the List of Shame series, I would just review some newer releases in between, and I would kind of group my opinions of those new releases into one video per week about new films I saw this week. These are only 2017 releases, so that way I can keep my thoughts fresh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the movie I liked the least this week to the movie I liked the most this week. And I saw a couple movies this week, so it's gonna be a bit of a long video. So let me pull up my list and we'll get started. The film I liked the least this week that I saw was Super Dark Times, and let me pull up Super Dark Times. Super Dark Times is the second film directed by Kevin Phillips, and what it's about is 4 kids who are a group of best friends. They ride their bikes around. It takes place in the 1990s, so the clothing is very bleak. It's not quite grungy yet, but it's getting there. And the biggest problem with this movie is its story, because it's very reminiscent of a movie I love called Mean Creek. And Mean Creek is about a group of kids who go off into the wilderness, or not the wilderness, but the forest by their house, and they build a raft or something, and one of the kids ends up dead. And the rest of the kids try to cover up that kid's death because one of the kids in the group is responsible. And it's almost beat for beat exactly the same in this movie. I mean, the kid doesn't die the same way. At least they came up with a creative way for this one to get killed. But it's the same thing. It's like the chubby kid gets killed. In the first movie, in Mean Creek, it was Josh Peck. And in this movie, it's just whatever the chubby kid's name is. I didn't even bother to look up the actor's name. The thing about Mean Creek that was so great was that even though it was dark, you could tell that there was some humanity behind the characters, and that all the acting was superb, like especially Rory Culkin, who was really great at that young of an age, and Josh Peck, who was the kid that died, was such an asshole, and you understood why everybody hated him so much, and all the characters made sense. And in this movie, it's like the tone is just really weird, and the filmmaking feels really amateur. Like, there's a scene in the beginning that is particularly well executed, and spoilers, since I'm sure you're probably not going to see this movie since it didn't get a wide release. A deer, it opens up in a high school. Right before it opens, and a deer jumped through the window and it's bleeding all over the floor. And they call the cops come in, and one of the cops kicks the deer in its head in and kills it. Mercy kills it. And that scene's really effective, but from there, we just have a bunch of bland characters and a repetitive story, and everywhere you think this movie is gonna go, it goes. The unstable kid gets unstable at the end and starts kidnapping people. Whoop-de-fucking-do. And it's just, I would skip this one. I had to rate it probably like a 5 out of 10. It's just it's not particularly bad, but it's very average and underwhelming, so I'd skip that one. The next movie I saw, I didn't particularly dislike this film. I actually liked it quite a bit, but Battle of the Sexes it's one of those movies that kind of, you watch it and then you forget about it like 2 days later. Like, the only reason I remember it is because I wanted to review it for this channel. And it's, if you haven't seen ads for it, it's a new biopic on Billie Jean King, played by Emma Stone. And Billie Jean King was a famous female tennis player in the 70s, and Steve Carell plays Bobby Riggs, who's kind of a washed-up tennis champion, and he challenges her to a big tennis match, and it's really publicized. It was a big thing in the 70s, and it was this huge televised event, and I would recommend this movie because it is a really good story and the performances are great. Emma Stone is fantastic. Steve Carell is hilarious. Sarah Silverman's really good in it. Andrea Riseborough is really, really good, and I don't think her character got the amount of development that I wish she would have, because she is quite an important character in the story. Bill Pullman's character, he's like the head of the tennis company or foundation that Billie Jean King plays with. And I don't know how accurate all the dialogue is in this movie, but his character felt like a little cartoony and a little over the top. I haven't watched the live broadcast, so for all I know, he could have actually said that horrible sexist shit. But it just seemed a little bit exaggerated, and that complaint could kind of go for the whole movie. It's supposed to take place in the 70s, and every modern movie that takes place in the 70s thinks that, oh, we can make it look more 70s if we put a brown filter on it. And it's just dumb. It's lazy and it's cheap. You can't even bother to shoot on fucking film. I know it's probably an independently financed picture, or it was Fox Searchlight, so I mean they probably had somewhat of a budget on them. It's good. It's not great. I wish it was great. It's a great story that deserves to be told really well, but unfortunately it kind of gets grouped in with those forgettable Oscar baity biopics that come out around this time of the year. And if Fox Searchlight knew what they were fucking doing, they would have put it in October, so that way it could actually qualify for a Best Picture run, but they threw it out in the middle of September, which is like a dead zone for movies, so great job, Fox Searchlight. Fucking idiot. If I did have to give it a rating, it would be a 6. It's good, it could have been better. Now we can get on to the great movies that I saw this week, and this is the movie I've seen the most recently of all the ones that I'm talking about, so it's probably the most fresh in my mind. It's not getting a lot of publicity right now. It aired at Toronto Film Fest, it aired at Vancouver Fantastic Fest, all those, and it got a really limited release in LA. It's only playing at like one theater in Santa Monica. But if you see this video and you really want to see something unique and interesting and creative and fucking dirty and violent and just emotional as all hell, see Brawl in Cell Block 99. If you've never heard of this movie, I don't blame you. It took me a little while before I even knew what it was. I only heard about it because I was just looking at movies that were airing at Toronto Film Fest, and this popped up, and I was like, what the hell is this? Brawl in Cell Block 99 is the new film by Craig Zahler, who directed Bone Tomahawk, a Western with Kurt Russell that came out back in 2015, which I would highly recommend. If you're into horror, you're into Westerns, you're into really violent and gory movies, you will love Bone Tomahawk. It's a bit slow, but it has a great payoff. And I could say the same thing about Brawl in Cell Block 99, although what I would say that this has over Bone Tomahawk is a lot more emotion. Vince Vaughn is the lead in this movie, and he is virtually unrecognizable. I mean, you know it's Vince Vaughn because of his face, but they shaved his head, he got big, they gave him a tattoo on his head, and he really steals the movie. And Don Johnson is in this too, and he's great, but the character of Bradley that Vince Vaughn is playing, you understand every single decision that he makes. And typically when a protagonist in a film makes really stupid and bad decisions, it usually comes out of nowhere, but you see Vince Vaughn right from the beginning, and every single thing he does is for a good reason. And it actually was satisfying to watch him just fucking pummel some of the people he does in this movie. It feels like sort of a throwback to 1970s exploitation movies, like kind of Death Wish-esque. It had a Death Wish-esque style to it, although it wasn't silly and campy. It took itself very seriously. But it's one of the few instances where a movie taking itself so seriously actually works for me. It has some campy gore and violence, and it can be funny at times, but this movie is disturbing. Just the further you get into it, the grosser and dirtier you feel. And I couldn't believe I was watching it in a theater, like in a public theater, with other people. I wasn't the only one in the theater, believe it or not. If you get a chance, I would highly recommend Brawl in Cell Block 99. If I had to give a rating, I would give it a 9 out of 10. It's almost flawless. The only thing that I have a problem with is some of the music choice. Felt a little off. I know it's supposed to be throwing back to that 1970s exploitation film style, but it just felt a little out of place. And there was some corny dialogue here and there, but I guess that had a purpose in it. But go see Brawl in Cell Block 99 if you can. It's a great movie. Now these two films that I'm going to talk about next, I don't prefer one over the other. They're both great in their own ways. And I have a feeling that each of these movies are going to be tied for my #1 film at the end of the year. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the one I saw first of these two movies, and it's The Florida Project, directed by Sean Baker, who directed Starlet, Tangerine, Takeout, some other independent films. Tangerine I got to see in a theater, and I actually got to meet Sean Baker when I saw it, and he was a really nice guy, and now he's got this new movie, The Florida Project, which I think it's his best work. This movie is just beautiful in every sense of the word. It's heartbreaking, it's funny, it's just beautiful to look at. The way Sean Baker shoots this movie, he shot it in 35mm film, and it looks gorgeous. All the colors are utilized beautifully, all the purples and the greens and the oranges and everything. It just works so well. Willem Dafoe, I think, gives his best performance in this movie that he's ever given in his entire career. I mean, he's always been great, but he really shines in this movie. And I think that a lot of great movies with a lot of great performances have come out in 2017, but the best performance all year is from Brooklyn Prince, who was 6 years old when she shot this, and she is unbelievably good. Everyone in this movie is great. Even Caleb Landry Jones, who I fucking hate and everything, is good in this. He actually doesn't mumble through all of his lines, and he articulates and he emotes, and he's good. Sean Baker actually got a good performance out of Caleb Landry Jones. I wish David Lynch and Jordan Peele could. Anyway, the movie's great. I would highly recommend it. I would even go as far as calling it a modern masterpiece. It's probably the best independent film I've seen all year. And I would tie it as the best film all year with another film I saw this weekend. That is Blade Runner 2049. It's the new film by Denis Villeneuve, who is mostly famous for films like Prisoners, Arrival, Sicario, Enemy. Those are all great movies, but I think Blade Runner 2049 is his best work. He teams up with cinematographer Roger Deakins once again, who he worked with on Prisoners and Sicario. And this is... I'm not even exaggerating when I say this might be the best looking movie I've ever seen. In terms of visual effects, it's even on a higher plane than Avatar or Life of Pi. Cinematography is immaculate. It's on a level of somebody like Kubrick, like 2001: A Space Odyssey could. The score by Hans Zimmer, oh my god, it's chilling and haunting and just beautiful. The performances by Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford and Robin Wright is great in this also. Ana de Armas is even good. This movie manages to get good performances out of some actors that I'm not a huge fan of, like Ana de Armas or Jared Leto. He's in the movie for 2 scenes, and he's actually not that bad. The actress who plays the main replicant villain, Love, I can't remember her name at the moment, but I can see her being really big in the future and getting a lot juicier roles from this movie. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to make a lot of money. It is 2 hours and 43 minutes long, and it's a different type of sci-fi than people are used to nowadays. It's not your typical action slog. It makes you think a lot. It makes you really have to pay attention to the plot to understand everything that's going on. There's a lot of complicated world building involved, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this is probably the best sequel ever made next to Empire Strikes Back. Like, this is a movie that's going to be talked about for years, and I've seen it twice in theaters already. And I'm going to wait for a little while before I do see it again because I need to process it a little more, but it is beautiful, and see it on the biggest screen you can. You will be missing out if you don't see it in a theater. Unfortunately, it's underperforming right now. It was shooting for a $50 million weekend, but unfortunately it's only made about 30 at the current moment. Please support this movie. I beg you. This is a film that needs to be seen in a theater. So this is where I'm going to place the ranking for the movies I've seen this week. If you want to check out the best movies and the worst movies I've seen so far this year, you can look at my Letterboxd. I believe I will be making a best of the year and worst of the year video at the end of the year. I still have a lot more to do in between then. I have some ideas for other series of videos I want to do. And of course, my list of shame. I need to get on that. I'm going to watch Kira now, so can't wait to talk to you guys about that.